all began when I was 2 years old. My mom used to say that the first 2 years of my life was like the quiet before the storm. And then as soon as I was able to walk and talk, it was like all hell broke loose in my household. I was what you call the spirited child, which pretty much meant that I didn't listen to anybody. I had to live life to the beat of my own drum. Always had to do things my own way. Didn't listen to my parents, didn't listen to my teachers, didn't listen to anybody. The challenge was that I grew up in a household that was incredibly controlling. My father was what you would call the my way or the highway kind of guy. Pretty much have to live by his rules and regulations or you can't live in his house at all. So, as you can tell, with my spirited ways and his controlling ways, we didn't mesh at all. In fact, it felt like the majority of the time we were worst enemies. Now, my mom was really my only source of love and nourishment, but it always felt like I needed to be something different. It always felt like I needed to be normal. It always felt like I needed to fit within the box in which that she was looking for. And when I wasn't that, I felt like, there was something wrong with me, that I wasn't able to get that unconditional love and understanding that I was looking for. And so I spent the majority of my childhood feeling like nobody understood me. Nobody got me. I felt isolated, I felt alone. And the challenge was that it wasn't just at my home that I felt this way. It was at school as well. I was bullied for the majority of my grade school years. Whether I was too sensitive or too chunky or happened to be the only Jewish family in a town that wasn't really so open to any kind of minority. Whatever it was, there was always something that made me feel different, that made me feel isolated, that made me feel like I didn't belong. And then what happened was I got into grade 8. And any friends that I had made up to that point, for no reason at all, decided to completely abandon me. I would go out on the playground and look to play soccer like I normally would, and nobody would pick me on their team. Nobody would even acknowledge that I existed. I spent the majority of that year hiding in the bathroom on recess because I couldn't take the shame of being by myself. And then, I get into high school, I move on to grade 9, and I think I'm going to leave behind all of my challenges. But one of the biggest challenges that I faced was that growing up in a small little town. I grew up in a very small town, 13,000 people in that town. The challenge with growing up in a small town is that when you are given an identity by other people, it's very hard for you to create your own new identity. So when I went into high school, I went into grade 9, I felt like I was going to leave behind all of these challenges, break free, break out of my shell, but unfortunately it was more of the same. It was more being bullied. It was more being picked on. It was more feeling like I didn't belong, feeling isolated, feeling alone. And then what happened was that I actually developed this voice in the back of my head. And it started to question everything that I would say and do. So I would want to put up my hand in class, or I would want to crack a joke that was really funny in my head before I said it. But then this voice would come on and it would say, "Are you sure you want to say that? Are you sure you want to do that? What are other people going to say? What are other people going to do? What if they use this against you?" I became so afraid of the judgment of other people that it almost paralyzed me. And it got to a point where I got into grade 11, and I was just so tired of trying that I completely disconnected from everybody and everything. I'm in grade 11, and I'm incredibly depressed. I'm desolate. I'm disconnected. I spend the majority of my time that year sitting in front of the TV, watching as many shows and movies that I can possibly get my hands on, hoping and praying that something will change. Hoping and praying that my life will change to the happy endings that I keep seeing on TV. But unfortunately, nothing changed. Now, one of the worst things about feeling depression, and I'm not sure if any of you have ever had feelings of depression before, but for me, one of the worst parts was that I felt like there was something wrong with me. I felt like I was the only one going through what I was going through. And as a result of that, I felt so uncomfortable to even share with anybody what I was going through. I didn't really have a very good relationship with my parents at the time, so I couldn't really share with them. I couldn't really trust them because the majority of my life, they wanted me to be something different. They wanted me to fit within a box. They wanted me to be normal. And well, I couldn't be any of those, so I didn't feel like I could talk to them at all. My older siblings were stuck in their own lives, and the few friends that I did have at school, I tested it out, but it always came back and backfired. So the worst part is that I felt like I could not communicate to any human being. Now, as corny as this might sound, the only living creature that I could talk to that year was my family dog. Now, I'm not sure if any of you have a dog or have ever had a dog, but the beautiful thing about dogs is that they only know how to respond in one way: love and understanding. So here I am, I'm in grade 11, I think I was like 16 years old, and I'm sitting on my couch and, I'm letting out all my anger and all my frustration and all my sadness, and there were times where I'm literally like, "It's you and me against the world, Brandy!" Because my dog was this little toy poodle named Brandy. So I'm just letting out all of my anger and all of my frustration to Brandy, and I swear to you, he would nestle up his little chin up on my leg and look at me directly in the eyes, and I swear it was like he was saying, "I get you, man. I get you." It was the first time in my life that I felt like anything actually understood me. And so it was Brandy that actually, believe it or not, got me through grade 11, because I had a safe place to express myself and let out everything that I was feeling and going through. And then, I get into grade 12, and there's this voice that goes through my head, and it's this voice that's coming from this belief system that I was taught at a young age from my father, which was that if I get good grades, then I can get out of high school and I can get into university. Then when I get into university, I can get a degree. When I get a degree, I can get a job, and of course when I get a job, I can make some money. Once I make the money, then I can buy all the things that I think are going to make me happy. The house, the cars, the vacations, the boats, the cottages, you name it, I'd have it. And then of course, once I'm rolling in money, I'd find myself a partner, settle down, get married, have some kids. Watch my kids grow up, grow old, move out of the house. Then, of course, I would retire, and finally, I'd get a chance to be happy. Sound familiar? Well, one of the unfortunate things that I've noticed in working with youth all across North America the past few years is that I've seen this very idea turn into a story that runs through the minds of youth of all ages. This idea that grades determine our success, and success determines our happiness. And this was a story that I told myself the majority of my youth. But I'm in grade 12 and I didn't know any different. So all I knew how to do was work really hard. So I put my nose to the grindstone and I pulled up my socks and I hustled, and I worked harder than I ever have before. And I studied and I got the grades. But this time they came at a cost. They came at a cost of my physical health. Now, not only am I emotionally and mentally in an unstable place, but physically, I actually have a stomach sickness from all the pressure that I'm putting on myself that's creating all this stress and this anxiety and having no idea what to do with it. I didn't know any tools and strategies at that point of how to manage it or how to move through it, so all I knew how to do was just work harder, push my way through it. I kept hearing this voice: the harder I work, the more likely I will succeed. And I got those grades, and I got into university. And I thought as soon as I got into university, well, that was it. I get a chance to start over, move out of the small town, and get a fresh start. Because at this point, I felt like I was a victim. I was a victim to my town, I was a victim to the people who bullied me, I was a victim to my parents, I was a victim to society. It was everybody else's fault, what I was going through. And I refused to take any kind of responsibility for what I was experiencing. Little did I know that I actually had a huge role in creating what I was feeling. But I didn't know it. So I go off to university, and my first year is like this coming out party for me. I crack open the shell, and I realize that I'm a social person. I'm an extrovert. I realize that I'm funny. I'm making friends from all different cities and cultures. I'm having the time of my life. And of course, the one catch is, I forgot to study. And so I get through my first year of university, and I have these very poor grades. And then, of course, this voice starts coming back into my head, and this voice starts saying, well, Michael, if you don't get these grades, then you're not going to get, the degree, you're not going to get the job, you're not going to get the money. And of course, you know the rest. And so, I started to feel guilty for having fun. The first time in my life, 18 years old, I have fun, and I feel guilty because how can I be having fun if I'm supposed to be working hard and getting ahead? And so I get into my second year and I put even more pressure than I put on myself before. Because at this point I felt like it was for real. And I worked harder than anybody. I'm the guy who you would come up to before the test and ask how to answer a question, and I would give you the answer perfect. But then I would get into the test and I would see a question that I didn't know the answer to, and I would freak out. And all of a sudden, I would be having this voice go through my head, if I don't get the marks on this question, then I'm not going to get the marks on this test, and I'm going to fail. And all of a sudden there's this story in my head that I'm convincing myself that I'm going to fail at life. And I have a panic attack. This is pretty much what happened every single test I wrote. Not to mention, the stomach sickness had come back from all the pressure and stress and anxiety that I was putting on myself to have to get those grades and have to be that success. The worst part was at this point, I honestly felt like my self-esteem was attached to me being smart. My self-esteem, my worth, my value in this world was attached to getting good grades in the classroom. And at this point, I'm working hard than anybody and not getting the grades. My self-esteem completely plummets. The depression comes back, the sickness gets worse and worse and worse, and before I know it, I'm digging myself a very deep hole. And I have a complete breakdown. I'm 19 years old. I'm in my first semester of second year university, and I have a complete breakdown. And I had absolutely no idea how to get myself through what I was going through at that time. Now, this is where the story takes a pretty miraculous turn, because my help showed up in the most unlikely of sources. And that was my father. So as I mentioned growing up, my dad was that my way or the highway kind of guy, super control freak, type A, workaholic, ran the family steel business, was driven by money, power, success, results, always had to be the provider, was driven by significance. And funny enough, he actually achieved everything that he had set out for himself by the age of 50. And he got to that age of 50, and the one thing that was missing, that he thought was going to be there the whole time, was the most important thing of all. Care to venture a guess? Happiness. The one thing that we think comes from all of the achievements and the results and the validation from outside of ourselves, in the end, never actually does. It sparked him to think in different ways, and he ended up hiring a life coach. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's somebody that inspires you to live your best possible life. And before he knew it, he got himself on this radical transformation and was reading all these books and going to these seminars and listening to these audios, and within 1 year had completely transformed his life. And here I am. I'm 19 years old. I go home for the holidays, and I see a completely different man. And I'm literally like, Dad, who are you? What are you on? Can I get some? Unfortunately, it was not the answer that I was looking for at the time, but it turned out to be the best answer of all. And he started to share with me some of the things that he had learned, the different ways of thinking, and the different ways of acting, and the different ways of speaking, and how it ultimately changed his experiences and his life. And I became inspired, and I said, well, if he can do it at 50, I gotta be able to do it at 19. And so it just so happened at the time that he was deciding to leave his role in the family steel business to become a life coach himself, to help inspire and empower people to wake up to what they're truly passionate about. It's about living a happier, healthier, more fulfilling life. And it just so happened that here I was, in the absolute darkest place that I had been. And a miracle had showed up, because here's my dad showing me a different way. And I said, well, if he can do it at 50, I can do it at 19, and I put aside my personal differences, and I became his first student. And he decided he got a chance to learn how to be a life coach, and I got a chance to learn how to live a completely different life. And within 6 months of coaching with my dad, the depression had completely melted away. The stomach sickness was a thing of the past, and for the first time in my life, I was living a happy life. I was experiencing moments of true happiness. Not the kind of happiness that you get when you crack a joke and everybody laughs. Not the kind of happiness you get when you get a good grade in class, because unfortunately we recognize that it never really lasts. I mean, if we're lucky, maybe a couple minutes, a couple days, a couple weeks at most. But the results and the achievements and the external validation never truly makes us happy. And the one thing that I learned that I wish I had known at a younger age was this idea that my self-esteem and my self-worth don't actually come from other people. Don't come from my results. Don't come from my achievements. Don't come from people laughing at my jokes. Don't come from any form of external validation. That my self-worth, how I see myself, feel myself, value myself, comes from myself. And that very idea blew my mind. And I started piece by piece looking at all areas of my life that I was craving that validation, craving that respect, craving that love. I recognized that it was like I was walking around with this empty cup, literally begging people to give me more, give me more. And you all know, when you actually get it, when you get the good grade, when people compliment you, when they lift you up, it feels good, but it doesn't last. It's not sustainable. And I recognized that everything that I was looking for in my life actually existed within me. Because everything that I was looking for was a feeling. It wasn't the results I wanted, it was how I felt when I got those results. And when I recognized this, I realized that I was in the driver's seat of my own life. Because I no longer needed to depend on other people to make me feel better. I no longer needed to depend on my results to make me feel better. I realized that if I wanted more love, I needed to learn to love myself. If I wanted more respect, I needed to learn to respect myself. If I wanted more validation of any kind, I needed to learn to validate myself. And it was that very point that I put into this practice, and I have been putting into practice for the past 9 years. And to this day, I believe I am an authentic walking example of looking to myself to fulfill my greatest desires and my biggest dreams. And if there's one message that I want to leave to each and every one of you today, is that if you're craving that validation, if you're craving that happiness, if you're craving that encouragement, that respect, if you feel like you're getting not treated in a way that you want to be treated, I have a new golden rule for you today. Not treat others the way you want to be treated. Because that doesn't work unless we treat ourselves that way first. When you treat yourself the way that you want to be treated, then you actually have so much more to give to everybody else in your life. And then you can treat others the way they want to be treated. Not the way you want to be treated, the way they want to be treated. And then, of course, what we give, we always, always get back. Thank you very much.